people who claim to be like ghost hunters and that sort of thing. Anybody ever watch any ghost hunter shows on TV? You ever see those? Like my favorite one got canceled though, the Taps group. But the thing is, because often the less scrupulous ones, they try to like include little tricks to make it look like paranormal things are happening when they aren't really happening. Well, magicians are really good at spotting that kind of thing because they're trained to trick people. Where if you want to fool a scientist, it's actually pretty easy because they aren't trained in deception, they're trained in facts. So because of that, you know, as a magician, I actually am interested in those types of things. And one of the most famous haunted houses ever was something called the Borley Rectory. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that because it burned down 65 years ago. But it was in England, and does everybody know what a rectory is? It's a house that a church owns that lets the priests live in it. Well, this was claimed to be the most haunted house in England. It was built in like 1867. And I even have a picture of it here. Pull this off the internet here. There's a picture of it. I mean, it's just a creepy old looking house. And that's actually probably from the 1915s or 20s or so. You can see it's just kind of an old looking house. And priests live in the house. And they claimed that they would go, at the end of the night, they go around, they shut all the windows, lock all the doors, and it was an old house, so they had those old skeleton keys that you got to put it in the lock and turn it a couple of times to lock the door. And then, when they'd come back the next morning, all the windows were up and the doors were unlocked. Or if not all of them, several of them would be. And this would happen over and over and over again. And so what they did is they thought, we'll have somebody investigate it. And they hired a magician named Harry Price, because magicians, they thought, well, he'd be able to see if there's any trickery going on. But if you think about it, they're priests. Why would the priests want to just trick people into thinking they have a haunted house? So Harry Price studied the house, and he claimed that he couldn't find any trickery, and he was convinced that it's really haunted. He claimed that he actually saw a key in the lock turn by itself after it had been locked. And of course, this was like in the 1920s, so he didn't have his flip phone to pull out and, you know, take a video of it or anything. But he did keep some of the keys. He would experiment with the keys on his own, and sometimes he would get the keys to turn by themselves. And eventually, the house burned down, so all the evidence was gone. But he wanted to go back and see the house just before they tore it completely down. So I have another picture of it where it's burned down, but it's still like its hull is remaining. You can see it's kind of a burned down wreckage there. But I don't know if you can notice, this is a picture that Harry himself took. There's a little thing here, a little white spot, and a close-up of it, it's actually a brick that was floating above the rubble. And he actually, and this is, you know, this picture was taken in 1935, so it was before they had Photoshop or anything like that. This is a close-up of it. He was just taking pictures of the rubble, and there's an actual photo of the brick floating in midair. And although there were workmen there on site, no one else saw it, and he didn't even see it until after he developed the photograph. So that's the only evidence he got that the house was haunted, because they couldn't really document it anywhere else. But magicians have become fascinated with this concept of keys turning by themselves. And so I've been searching in antique stores, and I finally found an old skeleton key. And if things are just right, this will turn by itself. Do you believe that? Nobody wants to answer. It's one of those things that it actually has to defy gravity to turn. Now, obviously, my hand's on a lock. But if you stare at it long enough, you'll start to see that it actually is defying gravity. This part of the key here that's a little bit heavier will start to lift. Like it's defying gravity. See, it's actually starting to turn. Like an invisible hand is grabbing it and turning it. It's kind of creepy. Imagine how I feel. It's in my hand. You can see now it's actually defying gravity. It's lifting up off. As it continues to go, once it gets straight up and down, it should just flop over. That's how gravity works. So I don't know. But what's really strange now, it's very hot out today. Here, hold out your hand for a second. It's actually kind of cool to the touch. Does it feel kind of cool? Even though it's been in my pocket, it's 100 degrees outside. After it turns over, it gets cold. It gets cool. And that's one of the things they claim is that if there's spirits, that they actually absorb energy out of things and make it cold. Kind of creepy. I'm not touching it again.